Snow was falling hard enough to erase footprints, but not hard enough to hide what someone had abandoned. An old woman and her loyal dog sat freezing under a tree, while cars slowed down, looked, and drove away. Miles away, a former Navy SEAL was leaving behind his own broken life, not knowing fate was about to stop him. He saw them for just a second in his headlights, and almost kept driving. But something in the dog's eyes refused to let him go, as if it knew this moment would decide everything. What he discovered after picking them up wasn't just tragedy. It was a truth someone desperately tried to bury. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe to support the channel. The snow fell softly over Pine Hollow, not in a hurry, not in anger, just steady, patient, like time itself, learning how to bury things no one wanted to face. It coated rooftops, softened the edges of fences, and dulled the sharpness of the world into something quiet and deceptive. From a distance, the town looked peaceful. From the inside, it felt like something had already cracked. Inside a 2-story house at the edge of Maple Street, warmth still lived, but only in the air, not in the people. Eleanor Vale stood in the kitchen, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for a dish towel. She was in her early 70s, slender and small-framed, her posture slightly bent with age, but not broken. Her silver hair was tied into a neat low bun, strands escaping like threads of moonlight. Her skin was pale, lined deeply around her mouth and eyes, not from bitterness, but from years of quiet endurance. She moved carefully, always as if afraid to disturb something invisible. At her feet, Bramble, her German shepherd, shifted his weight. He was large, once powerful, now softened by age. His black and tan coat had dulled along the spine, and there was a faint stiffness in his hind legs when he turned too quickly. But his eyes, deep amber, alert, and ancient, held something that had not aged at all. Loyalty. He patted across the wooden floor. His paw slipped. The sound came sharp and final, porcelain shattering against hardwood. Eleanor froze. For a moment, even the snow outside seemed to hold its breath. Then footsteps. Slow. Controlled. Celeste Vale entered the kitchen. She was in her late 30s, tall, slender, her posture straight in a way that suggested discipline rather than warmth. Her long coat, cream-colored wool, hung perfectly along her frame. Her blonde-brown hair was styled carefully, not a strand out of place. Even now, inside her own home, she looked curated. Her face was beautiful and cold. Her eyes dropped to the broken vase. A thin crack appeared in her expression, not grief, not shock, just irritation. "That was imported," she said quietly. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Eleanor opened her mouth. "I'm so sorry, I didn't—" "It's always something." Celeste didn't look at her. She knelt slightly, not to help, but to inspect the damage. "This house isn't a place for accidents," she added. "It's not a place for chaos." Her gaze flicked to Bramble. The dog stood still now, ears slightly back, but not in fear, more like calculation. Celeste stood up slowly. "For months now," she continued, "I've been adjusting, making room, being patient." Eleanor lowered her eyes. She knew this tone. It wasn't anger, it was conclusion. "You move too slowly. The dog sheds everywhere. The smell." "She's not a problem," Eleanor said softly. It was the first time she had interrupted. Celeste tilted her head slightly. "No?" Her lips curved, not quite a smile. "Then why does everything seem harder when you're here?" Silence settled like frost between them. Eleanor's fingers tightened around the dish towel. There were things she could say, things she had swallowed for months. But she didn't, because she had lived long enough to know. Some people didn't want truth. They wanted permission, and she wasn't going to give it. Outside, the wind picked up. The snow thickened. Inside, something finally snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just quietly, completely. "If you can't live by the rhythm of this house," Celeste said, her voice smooth and final, "then perhaps you should find somewhere else to live." There it was, not shouted, not disguised, just placed between them like a cold object. Eleanor felt it settle inside her chest. Owen wasn't home. He hadn't been for weeks. Working up in the northern mountain range, managing a construction site where signals came and went like ghosts. She had tried calling him many times. Each call had rung once, then died. She had assumed it was the mountains. Now, she wasn't so sure. She didn't ask to stay, not again. She walked to her room, packed slowly, a small bag, a folded sweater, a photograph she didn't look at. Bramble followed her, every step. When she reached the door, she paused. Her hand rested on the frame for a moment longer than necessary. Not because she wanted to stay, but because she understood something with quiet clarity. This was no longer her home. The cold outside struck her like a memory she had forgotten she still owned. Sharp, immediate, unforgiving. The road out of town stretched ahead, long and white, disappearing into trees heavy with snow. Bramble stayed close, too close. His body brushed her leg with every step, as if measuring her strength through contact. She didn't notice when her breathing grew shallow. She didn't notice when her steps slowed. Only when her legs refused to move further did she finally stop. A large pine stood by the roadside. She lowered herself beside it. The world had narrowed to wind, snow, and the slow ache in her bones. Bramble pressed against her. His body trembled, but he did not move away. Cars passed. 1, 2, 3. Headlights cut through the storm, illuminating her for a second at a time, like a truth people preferred not to look at too long. Some slowed. No one stopped. Bramble suddenly lifted his head. His ears snapped forward. A low growl vibrated in his chest, not loud, but certain. He wasn't looking at the road. He was staring into the dark line of forest behind them, as if something there had already seen them. Miles away, on the same road that would soon carry fate toward them, a truck moved steadily through the storm. Inside sat Cade Mercer, 45, former Navy SEAL, 6'1", broad-shouldered, built like a man who had learned to carry weight without showing strain. His dark brown hair was cut in a clean undercut, streaked faintly with gray at the temples. His face was sharp, masculine, clean-shaven, with a strong jawline and deep-set blue-gray eyes that carried something heavier than exhaustion. He wore a long-sleeved green camouflage shirt fitted close to his body. Practical, precise, disciplined. Everything about him suggested control. Everything except his eyes. They were somewhere else, somewhere behind him. He hadn't slammed the door when he left, hadn't shouted, hadn't asked questions, because the answers had already been there. A jacket that wasn't his, a glass that wasn't his, a silence that didn't want to be broken. Now the road stretched in front of him, endless and empty. He didn't know where he was going, only that he wasn't going back. But something followed him. Not a person, a memory, snow, a mission, a man lying in white, unmoving. Cade arriving seconds too late, always seconds too late. The headlights caught something ahead, a shape, small, still. He drove past, 10 yards, 15. His hands tightened on the wheel, his jaw locked. The storm roared louder, or maybe it was something inside him. He slowed, stopped. The truck idled in the cold. For a moment, he didn't move, because this wasn't just about them. It was about what would happen if he didn't turn back. He exhaled once, opened the door. The wind hit him hard. Snow immediately clung to his clothes. He stepped out, walked back, each step heavy, not from snow, from memory. The old woman looked smaller up close, fragile, but not broken. Her face lifted slightly when she heard him. Bramble stepped forward, not barking, not attacking, just watching, measuring, the way soldiers measure. Cade crouched slightly. His voice was low, steady. "You won't make it out here." No pity, no softness, just truth. Eleanor looked at him, really looked, and for a moment something strange passed between them. Recognition, not of faces, but of something deeper, the kind of tired that doesn't come from the body. Bramble stepped aside, just enough. That was all the permission Cade needed. He reached out, lifted Eleanor carefully. She was lighter than he expected. Too light. As he carried her toward the truck, snow swirling around them like something alive, Bramble followed close behind. Halfway there, the dog stopped again, turned, looked once more into the forest, then finally climbed in. Cade closed the door, walked around to the driver's side, paused, just for a second. Then he got in and drove. The truck slowed as the road narrowed into a thin, snow-choked path cutting through the forest. Tall pines loomed on both sides, their branches heavy with white, bending inward like silent witnesses. The storm had softened, but the cold had sharpened. Clean, precise, merciless. Cade Mercer leaned forward slightly behind the wheel, his eyes scanning the path ahead. The headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the drifting snow. "Where?" he asked. His voice was steady, but quieter now, less command, more question. In the passenger seat, Eleanor Vale lifted a trembling hand, pointing ahead through the frost-streaked windshield. "There," she whispered. The cabin emerged slowly. Not suddenly, never suddenly, but as if it had always been there, just waiting to be seen again. A small wooden structure stood at the edge of the forest, half buried in snow. The roof sagged slightly on one side. The windows were clouded with age. The porch leaned forward like an old man, tired of standing. And yet, there was something stubborn about it, something that had refused to collapse. Cade pulled the truck to a stop. For a moment, no one moved. The engine idled. The wind hissed softly through the trees. Bramble sat in the back, alert now, his ears upright, his gaze fixed on the cabin, not fearful, not relaxed, just attentive. Cade stepped out first. The cold hit him like a blade across the face. He ignored it, walked toward the front door. Each step crunched loudly in the snow, breaking the silence the storm had left behind. He reached for the handle. It didn't open. The wood had swollen from years of weather. He stepped back slightly, then drove his shoulder into it once, twice. On the third hit, the door gave way with a deep, hollow crack. Inside, the air smelled of dust, wood, and something older, something like time itself. Cade stepped in cautiously. His boots echoed against the floor. The place was frozen, not just cold, abandoned. He moved through the space with quiet efficiency, checking corners, windows, the back door. No movement, no signs of recent life. But also, no signs of decay beyond repair. He returned to the truck, opened the passenger door. Eleanor tried to stand, but her legs faltered. Cade didn't hesitate. He lifted her again, firm, careful. She didn't protest this time. She simply held onto his shoulder lightly, her breath shallow against the cold air. Bramble jumped down on his own, landing heavily but steady, immediately circling close. Inside, Cade set Eleanor down on an old wooden chair near the center of the room. The chair creaked under her weight, but held. She looked around slowly. Her eyes moved over the walls, the corners, the ceiling beams. Something flickered across her face. Not sadness, not joy, recognition. "This was ours," she said quietly. Her voice didn't rise. It sank like a stone dropped into deep water. Cade didn't respond. He had already moved on. He found the fireplace. Stone, old but intact. He checked the flue, cleared debris, moved quickly, efficiently. Within minutes he had kindling arranged, a small flame coaxed into life. It flickered weakly at first, then caught, then grew. Warmth returned slowly. Not enough to chase the cold away, but enough to remind them it could be done. Eleanor watched him work. There was something about the way he moved, precise, controlled, like every motion had been practiced 1,000 times before. "Military?" she murmured. Cade glanced at her briefly. "Used to be?" That was all he offered. Bramble moved closer to the fire. He lowered himself onto the floor, letting out a slow breath. But his eyes remained open, watching, always watching. Minutes passed, then longer. The room began to change. The shadows softened. The air shifted. The cold retreated, inch by inch. Eleanor's hands rested in her lap, still trembling, still cold, but no longer alone. "I'm sorry," she said after a while. Cade didn't look at her. "For what?" "For bringing you here. For needing help." The fire cracked softly. Cade adjusted a piece of wood, then spoke. "I didn't bring you here because you asked." A pause. "I brought you here because you needed it." Eleanor studied him. There was no kindness in his tone, but there was no cruelty either. Just fact. She nodded slowly. That she understood. Hours passed. The storm outside faded into a distant whisper. Inside, the fire grew stronger. The cabin breathed again. That night, the wind returned, not as a storm, as a reminder. They sat near the fire. 3 figures, 3 lives that had slipped out of the places they were supposed to belong. Eleanor spoke first, not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. She told him about the cabin, about her husband, Thomas Vale, a quiet man with broad hands and a steady back who had built parts of this place himself. She described him simply: medium height, strong in a way that came from years of labor, not training dark hair once, now only remembered a man who didn't speak much but always finished what he started. He believed a house should outlive the people in it, she said. He used to say, if the walls are strong enough, someone will always find their way back. Cade listened, not because he wanted to, because he couldn't help it. She spoke of years passing, children growing, rooms filling, then emptying, and eventually becoming someone who no longer fit inside the life she had built. Cade's turn never really came. He didn't offer a story, only fragments. Snow, a name he didn't repeat, a moment he didn't describe fully. The fire burned lower. Eleanor drifted into sleep, her breathing shallow but steady. Cade remained awake, sitting near the door, not fully relaxed, never fully. Bramble shifted, not toward Eleanor, toward Cade. The dog settled down between them, not touching either, but close enough to both. In the middle of the night, Bramble's head lifted sharply. No bark, no movement at first, just stillness. His ears angled toward the back of the cabin, his eyes fixed on something beyond the wall, something neither Cade nor Eleanor could hear. Then, a low, almost silent growl, not fear, not warning, recognition, as if whatever stood beyond that wall was not entirely unfamiliar. Cade was on his feet instantly. He moved without sound, crossed the room, paused near the back door, listened. Nothing, only wind. He opened the door slowly. The cold rushed in. The night stretched wide and empty behind the cabin. Snow drifted softly across the ground. No figures, no sound. But as his eyes adjusted, he saw them. Tracks, fresh, not animal, human. They led from the tree line, across the yard, stopped near the back wall, then turned and disappeared back into the forest. Cade crouched slightly, studying the spacing, the depth. Someone had stood there, watching. Behind him, Bramble stood in the doorway now, silent, unmoving, eyes still locked on the same direction. Cade straightened, closed the door, locked it. He didn't say anything to Eleanor. She needed sleep, not fear. But he didn't sit back down. Instead, he moved a chair closer to the door, sat, waited, because something had changed, not in the storm, not in the cabin, in the story. Morning came quietly to the cabin, not with warmth, not with comfort, but with light, thin and pale, slipping through the frost-covered windows like something cautious, unsure if it was welcome. Cade Mercer was already awake. He hadn't slept much. Men like him rarely did when something felt off. He stood near the back door, boots planted firmly, one hand resting lightly against the wooden frame as he studied the ground outside. The snow had settled during the night, smoothing over most disturbances. But not all. There were faint depressions still visible near the edge of the clearing, subtle, almost erased, but deliberate enough to leave a trace for someone who knew how to look. Cade crouched slightly, his breath visible in the cold air. He didn't touch the snow, didn't need to. Spacing, depth, direction. Whoever had been there wasn't wandering. They had come with purpose, and they had left carefully. Behind him, the fire crackled faintly. Eleanor Vale stirred in her chair. She had slept there, wrapped in an old blanket Cade had found in a closet that smelled faintly of cedar and thyme. When she opened her eyes, She didn't panic. She simply blinked, once, twice, orienting herself not to where she was, but to what remained of herself inside it. Her gaze found Cade, then the door, then the snow beyond. "You've seen something," she said. Her voice was still soft, but steadier now. Not fear, recognition. Cade didn't answer immediately. He stepped back inside, closing the door behind him, sealing the cold out again. "Someone came close," he said finally. Eleanor's hands tightened slightly around the edge of the blanket. She didn't ask who, because she already knew the more important question. "Why?" Cade met her eyes. "I'm working on that." Bramble rose slowly from the floor. The old German shepherd stretched, his joints stiff but controlled. Then he walked, deliberate, focused, not toward Eleanor this time. Toward the far corner of the room, near the fireplace. He began to sniff, not casually, not out of curiosity, systematically. His nose moved across the floorboards, tracing invisible lines, pausing, circling, returning. Then he scratched, once, twice, then again. Cade watched him for a moment. There was nothing frantic in the dog's behavior. No panic, no confusion, just insistence. "What is it?" Eleanor asked quietly. Cade didn't respond. He stepped closer, knelt, pressed his palm flat against the wood, then tapped. Hollow. He stood, moved to his pack, and pulled out a compact multi-tool. Within minutes, he had pried up the first board. Dust rose in a thin cloud. The smell of old wood deepened. Another board, then another. Beneath it, a small metal box. Eleanor leaned forward, her breath catching. I don't remember that being there." Cade lifted it carefully. It wasn't locked, just hidden. Inside, papers, folded tightly, preserved by darkness more than care. Cade opened them slowly. The first document was official. Land ownership records. The name, Thomas Vale. The date, decades old. Untransferred. Unchanged. Eleanor's fingers trembled. He never sold it. Her voice was almost a whisper to herself. He always said he wouldn't, even when things were hard. Cade unfolded the next piece. A letter, handwritten. The ink slightly faded, but still legible. Eleanor reached out. "Let me." Her hands shook as she read. Her eyes moved slowly across the page, then stopped, then continued. Tears didn't fall. They gathered, quiet, unforced. "He knew," she murmured. "He knew there might come a time when someone would try to take this place, when I might not be strong enough to stop them." She exhaled softly. "He said, land isn't just property, it's memory, and memory shouldn't be signed away under pressure." Cade said nothing, but something in his expression shifted, just slightly. There was a third item, a rough map, hand-drawn. It showed the cabin, the surrounding forest, and several marked points deeper into the woods. Cade studied it, then folded everything carefully and placed it back into the box. Bramble hadn't moved. He remained by the open floor, watching, as if confirming something. Cade replaced the boards, not perfectly, but enough. "Who else knew about this?" he asked. Eleanor shook her head slowly. "Just Thomas and me. We never told Owen. We thought—" She stopped. Didn't need to finish. They both understood. What you protect in silence can be taken in silence. Later that morning, Cade made the drive into town. The roads were still rough but passable. Pine Hollow looked smaller in daylight, less like a town, more like a place people passed through, until they stopped noticing who stayed behind. The sheriff's office sat near the center, a modest building, functional, unpretentious. Inside, Sheriff Nolan Pike stood behind the desk. He was in his late 50s, broad through the shoulders, his build softened slightly by age, but still grounded. His face was weathered, the kind shaped by years outdoors rather than time alone. A trimmed mustache framed his upper lip, and his eyes, sharp, observant, missed very little. He wore a winter sheriff's uniform in muted brown, a heavy coat hanging open slightly, revealing a radio clipped neatly to his chest. He looked up as Cade entered. Recognition flickered briefly. "You look like trouble," Nolan said. His tone wasn't hostile, just honest. Cade stepped forward. "Looking for information." Nolan gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." The conversation was short, efficient. Cade didn't offer more than necessary. Nolan didn't ask for more than needed. "There's been interest," Nolan admitted after a moment. "Developers sniffing around the outskirts. Land like that, quiet, isolated. It starts looking valuable when the wrong people notice it." "Through who?" Cade asked. Nolan leaned back slightly. "There's a broker, not local, shows up when something's about to change." A pause. "Doesn't leave much behind except paperwork and questions." Cade nodded. Nolan studied him more closely now. "You involved in this?" Cade shook his head once. "No." Then, after a beat, "Not yet." Nolan didn't smile, but something in his eyes shifted, understanding. "Be careful," he said. "People don't walk out into storms to admire property lines." Cade stood, left. When he returned to the cabin, the light had shifted again. Late afternoon now, the kind that fades early in winter. Eleanor sat near the window, Bramble at her feet. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, but like the world had pressed in closer around her. Cade stepped inside, closed the door. "She wasn't just angry," he said. Eleanor looked up. "She needed you gone." Silence settled between them. Not heavy, just inevitable. Bramble stood, moved again, toward the back door this time. He paused there, head tilted slightly, listening. Then, without warning, he let out a sharp single bark, not loud, not frantic, just precise. He turned his head toward Cade, held his gaze for one long second, and then walked to the wall near the storage area. He stopped, looked back again, as if to say, "You're looking in the wrong place." Cade followed. The storage area was small, bare, but there, near the lower edge of the wall, a thin line of exposed wiring, cut, not cleanly, not professionally, but intentionally. Cade crouched, ran his fingers lightly along the break. Cold metal, recent. Eleanor stood slowly behind him. "What does that mean?" Cade didn't look up. "It means someone didn't want this place fully powered." "Why?" Cade straightened, turned slightly. "Because darkness hides things." Bramble moved again, now toward the side window, his nose traced along the edge, then paused. Outside, near the fence. A faint shape caught Cade's eye. He stepped out. The cold had deepened again. Near the wooden fence, caught on a splinter. A strip of fabric, light-colored, soft, expensive. He pulled it free, examined it. Eleanor stepped beside him. Her breath caught. "I know that," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. "That's Celeste's." The wind moved through the trees again, soft, persistent. And for the first time since arriving at the cabin, Cade didn't feel like he was standing in someone else's story. He felt like he had just stepped into the middle of something that had been waiting long before he arrived. The cabin no longer felt abandoned. It felt watched. That difference was small, but absolute. Late afternoon light filtered through the frost-stained windows, turning everything inside the cabin pale and brittle. The fire had burned low, leaving behind a bed of glowing embers that pulsed faintly like a tired heartbeat. Eleanor Vale sat near the table now, her posture straighter than before, though her hands still carried the tremor of exhaustion. The old brown coat hung loosely from her shoulders, the fabric worn thin at the elbows, as if time had leaned on it too often. Bramble lay beside her chair, head resting on his paws, eyes half-lidded, but not asleep. He hadn't slept deeply since they arrived. Dogs like him didn't when something unsettled the air. Cade Mercer stood near the doorway, his arms crossed, gaze fixed somewhere beyond the walls. He wasn't thinking about the storm anymore. He was thinking about intention. Someone had come. Someone had searched. Someone had left. And none of it had been random. The knock came just before the light faded. Not loud, not hesitant. 3 firm taps, measured. Bramble's head lifted instantly. No bark, no growl, just stillness. The kind that came before judgment. Cade stepped forward, opened the door. Celeste Vale stood on the porch. She looked untouched by the storm. Her cream-colored wool coat was pristine, the fabric sharp against the gray of the forest. Her hair, soft brown with lighter highlights, fell neatly around her shoulders, styled with the kind of care that suggested she hadn't rushed here. Her face carried concern, perfectly shaped, perfectly placed, and entirely calculated. "I've been looking everywhere," she said, stepping forward slightly. Her voice was smooth, controlled, wrapped in something that resembled worry. "I was so afraid something had happened." Eleanor didn't stand. She didn't move at all. She simply looked at her, and in that look, something had changed. "I'm alive," Eleanor said quietly. Her voice didn't tremble this time. Celeste's smile faltered for half a second, then returned. "Of course you are. I knew you'd be. She glanced around the cabin as if noticing it for the first time. "I didn't expect you to come here." "You didn't expect me to survive the walk," Eleanor replied. Silence. Cold. Sharp. Celeste's eyes flicked briefly to Cade. She assessed him quickly. Height, build, posture, threat. Her gaze lingered just long enough to understand. This wasn't a man who could be dismissed. "And you are?" she asked. "Someone who stopped," Cade said. That was all. Celeste nodded slowly, polite, distant. "I appreciate that," she said. Then, turning back to Eleanor, her tone softened. "Come home. It's not safe out here. We can talk about everything. We can fix this." Eleanor's fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the table. For a moment, her old instinct, to smooth things over, to keep peace, rose inside her. But something stronger followed. "You didn't ask me to come back when I left," she said. "You told me to go." Celeste exhaled softly, as if dealing with a misunderstanding. "You're taking things too literally. I was upset. We both were. People say things." "You didn't say them," Eleanor interrupted. "You chose them." That landed harder, because it was true. Celeste's expression cooled, just a degree, but enough. "This isn't about emotions," she said, her voice sharpening slightly. "This is about practicality. You can't stay here. The property, this place, it's not suitable anymore." There it was, not shouted, not exposed, but present. Cade shifted slightly, just enough for Celeste to notice. "And what would make it suitable?" he asked. Celeste turned to him fully now, her eyes narrowed just slightly. "A proper arrangement, legal clarity, management." A pause. "Ownership that reflects reality." Eleanor let out a small breath. Not a sigh, more like something leaving her. "You mean ownership that reflects what you want?" Celeste didn't deny it. She didn't confirm it either. She simply held her ground. "That land is wasted here," she said. "It could be something more, something valuable." Eleanor nodded slowly. "Yes," she said, "it already is." The silence that followed was no longer fragile. It was solid, like ice that had finally frozen all the way through. Celeste straightened. Her smile returned, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. "Think about it," she said. "I'll come back tomorrow." She turned, walked away, her footsteps crisp against the snow. The door closed. The cabin felt smaller afterward, not because of space, but because of what had just been revealed. Eleanor didn't speak for a long time, neither did Cade. Finally, "She won't stop," Eleanor said. "No," Cade replied. Bramble stood, moved to the door, sat there, watching, as if waiting. Night came quickly. The forest darkened into something deeper, quieter, but no less alive. Cade packed slowly. Not much. He hadn't brought much. Didn't intend to stay. "I'll head out in the morning," he said. Not looking at Eleanor. She didn't answer immediately, because she understood what that meant, losing one person, then another. "That's your choice," she said softly. It wasn't accusation. It wasn't pleading, just truth. Bramble lifted his head. His gaze moved between them. Then he stood, walked to the door, and scratched. Once. Cade frowned, opened it. The night air rushed in, colder than before, sharper. Bramble stepped out without hesitation. "Hey!" Cade followed. The dog moved fast, faster than he had all day, cutting across the clearing, into the trees. Cade cursed under his breath, then followed. Snow crunched under his boots. Branches brushed his shoulders. The forest swallowed sound. Bramble didn't slow. He didn't hesitate. He moved with certainty. They reached the lake, a frozen stretch of white, wide and still beneath the moonlight. Bramble stopped near the edge. Barked once, short, urgent. Cade approached carefully. The ice looked solid, but something about it felt wrong. Bramble pawed at a spot near the surface. Snow brushed away. There, a dark shape beneath the ice. Cade knelt, pressed his glove against the surface. Thin, too thin. He moved along the edge, found a safer angle, used a fallen branch, struck carefully. Crack. The ice gave just enough. He reached in, cold biting instantly through the glove. Pulled out a waterproof bag. Heavy. Inside, documents, printed emails, transfer forms, signatures, missing one. Eleanor's. Cade stared at the pages, then back at the lake. Someone had tried to hide this, not destroy it, hide it, which meant someone planned to come back. Bramble didn't celebrate, didn't relax. Instead, he turned his head slowly, looking past Cade, past the lake, into the trees, and for a brief second, his posture changed. Not alert, not defensive, recognizing. As if whatever stood in the darkness was not just a threat, but something connected. Cade felt it too, not clearly, but enough. He stood, grabbed the bag. "Let's go." They moved back toward the cabin. Faster now. The wind picked up again, not a storm, but a warning. When the cabin came into view, something was wrong. The door, it was open. Cade ran, boots pounding against frozen ground. Inside, the fire still burned. The chair still stood. But Eleanor? Gone. The silence inside the cabin was no longer empty. It was taken. The cabin felt hollow without her. Not empty, hollow. Like something had been taken out of it that couldn't be replaced by fire, or walls, or memory. Cade Mercer stood just inside the doorway, the cold trailing in behind him, melting slowly across the wooden floorboards. The fire still burned in the hearth, steady, almost indifferent. Nothing was overturned, no signs of struggle, no broken furniture, no panic. Only absence. He moved slowly through the room, scanning. His mind worked the way it always had, cutting away noise, isolating fact. The chair was where she'd been sitting, the blanket still draped over its arm. A cup near the table, half filled, cold. No chaos, no resistance. Which meant she hadn't fought, or hadn't been able to. Cade stepped outside again. The wind had sharpened, pushing thin veils of snow across the clearing. He crouched low, studied the ground. There, tracks, not footsteps, tires, 2 sets, one heavier, one lighter. They had pulled in, turned, left, quick, efficient. Cade stood. The cold pressed against him harder now, but he didn't feel it the same way. There was something else rising in its place. Not anger, not yet. Something older, something that didn't rush. Behind him, Bramble let out a low, strained whine. The dog stood at the edge of the clearing, body rigid, head lifted, nostrils flaring. Then he moved, not hesitantly, not cautiously, with urgency. Cade didn't call him back. He followed. They cut through the forest. The snow deepened, dragging at Cade's boots, but Bramble moved like he belonged to the terrain. His black and tan coat slicing through the white, his body low, focused. He wasn't tracking randomly. He was remembering. Every few yards he paused, adjusted, turned, then pushed forward again. Cade kept pace, breathing steady, heart controlled. This wasn't a rescue yet. This was approach. The trees thinned, the ground leveled, and ahead, a structure emerged, an old warehouse. It had once been a storage facility for timber, years ago, when the logging industry had still touched Pine Hollow. Now it stood forgotten. A long, low building of rusted metal and splintered wood. The roof sagged slightly. One side wall bore a faded company name, half peeled by time. But there was something new. Tracks. Recent. Cade slowed, dropped lower, He moved to the side, circled. The rear of the building had a broken panel, just wide enough to see through. He leaned in. Inside, light. A portable lamp cast a harsh, white glow across the space. Eleanor Vale sat in a chair at the center, her coat still on, her hands gripping the sides of the seat. Across from her, Celeste, and another man, Marcus Hale. Mid-40s, tall, lean, his posture slightly hunched forward like a man used to negotiating rather than commanding. His hair was slicked back, dark with strands of gray at the temples. A thin beard framed his jawline, meticulously trimmed. His eyes were quick, calculating, the kind that measured people the way others measured land. He wore a charcoal overcoat over a tailored suit, too formal for the setting, but intentional. A man who believed control came from presentation. "Just sign it," Marcus said, his voice calm but edged. "We've made this as easy as possible." Eleanor didn't move. Celeste stepped forward, her composure thinner now, less polished. "This doesn't have to be difficult," she said. "You don't even use the land. You can come back home. We can fix everything." Eleanor looked at her, really looked. "You don't want me back," she said. "You want me gone, properly." Celeste's jaw tightened. Marcus exhaled, stepped in. "Let's not complicate this," he said. "This is a transaction, nothing more." Eleanor's hands trembled, but her voice did not. "It's not a transaction," she said. "It's my life." Cade remained still, watching, listening. He didn't move yet, because this moment wasn't ready. A seal didn't rush into chaos. He shaped it. Outside, Bramble didn't wait. The dog's body lowered, muscles coiled, eyes locked. Then, without command, he moved, not into the door, not loudly, but fast, silent, slipping through a gap along the side of the building. Inside. Marcus turned at the sound. Too late. Bramble lunged, not wild, not uncontrolled, precise. His body collided with Marcus's legs, knocking him off balance just as the man reached for something inside his coat. The room shifted. And that was the moment Cade chose. He moved. The door burst inward under his weight. The cold air rushed in behind him. Celeste froze. Marcus hit the ground hard, the breath driven out of him. Cade crossed the distance in 3 steps. One hand grabbed Marcus's wrist. Twisted. Controlled. The object clattered to the floor. A handgun. Cade kicked it aside, pressed Marcus face down against the concrete. Celeste backed away. Hands raised, her composure shattered now. "You don't understand," she began. "I do," Cade said. His voice wasn't loud, didn't need to be. Bramble stood between Eleanor and the others, chest rising, eyes sharp. Eleanor's breathing was uneven, but she was upright. Present. Sirens cut through the distance, faint, then louder. Sheriff Nolan Pike arrived within minutes, his truck skidding slightly as it pulled up outside. He stepped in, taking in the scene quickly. Gun on the ground. Marcus restrained. Celeste, pale and silent. Eleanor shaken. Nolan didn't waste time. "Hands where I can see them," he said. Marcus didn't resist, didn't have the strength. Celeste tried to speak. Explain, redirect. Nolan didn't listen. He moved with quiet authority, cuffing Marcus first, then Celeste. "This ends here," he said. Cade stepped back, released his hold. The warehouse fell silent again. Eleanor exhaled slowly, as if something inside her had finally unclenched. Bramble returned to her side, pressed close. She rested a hand on his head, not trembling, steady. They brought her back to the cabin. The fire was still alive, waiting. Cade added wood, watched the flames rise again. Eleanor sat near the hearth, wrapped in warmth, but different now. Not broken, changed. "Thank you," she said after a while. Cade shook his head slightly. "You stayed," she corrected. That he didn't deny. Outside, the storm had fully passed. The sky cleared slowly, revealing stars above the trees. But something else moved through Pine Hollow now. Word. It spread quickly, faster than snow, about what had happened, about who had been taken, about what had almost been lost. And somewhere beyond the edges of that small town, a man heard it. He stepped out of a truck at the edge of town the next morning. Owen Vale, late 30s. Broad-shouldered, worn by long hours of labor rather than age. His hair was dark, slightly unkempt, his face marked by a week's worth of stubble and something heavier, guilt. His eyes searched the town like someone looking for something already lost. He had come back, and this time, he wasn't the same man who had left. Morning arrived like a quiet confession. The storm had passed days ago, yet its echo remained, not in the sky, but in the spaces between people. The cabin stood steady now, smoke curling gently from the chimney, no longer a place of survival, but something closer to a decision. Cade Mercer stood outside, splitting wood. Each swing of the axe was precise, controlled, measured. The rhythm was familiar, something between discipline and meditation. Lift, strike, split. He didn't look toward the road, but he knew when the truck arrived. The engine cut. A door opened, then another. Cade didn't turn immediately. He finished the swing, let the log fall cleanly into two pieces. Then he looked. Owen Vale stood near the edge of the clearing. He wasn't dressed for appearances, no polished coat, no practiced posture, just a worn flannel jacket, sleeves rolled up unevenly, jeans stained with dust and work, boots marked by long miles. He looked like a man who had been away too long and had returned too late. His face carried weight. Late 30s, broad-shouldered but not imposing, his build shaped by labor rather than training. His dark hair was unkempt, falling slightly over his brow, and his jaw was lined with uneven stubble. But it was his eyes, gray, tired, searching, that revealed everything. He didn't step forward right away, didn't speak, as if crossing the space between him and the cabin required more than distance. Cade rested the axe against the stump, wiped his hands slowly. "She's inside," he said. Owen nodded once. No thanks, no questions, just movement. Inside, Eleanor Vale sat by the window, the same chair, the same place, but not the same woman. She looked up as the door opened. Her eyes found Owen, and for a moment, time didn't move. Mom. That word broke something, not loudly, not visibly, but completely. Eleanor didn't stand. She didn't rush to him. She simply looked, the way someone looks at something they've lost once and aren't sure they've truly found again. "You came back," she said. Owen stepped closer, slowly, like approaching something fragile. "I should have come sooner." Silence stretched between them, not empty, full. "I didn't know," Owen continued, his voice rough, uneven. "I didn't know what was happening here." Eleanor tilted her head slightly, not accusing, not forgiving, just listening. "You didn't ask," she said. Owen flinched, because that was the truth. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaled hard. "I thought things were fine. Celeste said you were adjusting, that everything was under control." Eleanor's lips pressed together, a small, tired smile. "Control," she repeated softly. Owen's shoulders dropped. The fight went out of him before it could even begin. "I failed you," he said. No defense, no explanation, just fact. Eleanor watched him closely, searching, not for perfection, for honesty. "You didn't fail me in one moment," she said. "You failed me slowly, quietly." A pause. "By not being there when it mattered." Owen swallowed. Hard. "I know." He didn't try to fix it, didn't try to explain it away, because some truths don't need defense. They sat together in silence, not comfortable, but real. Outside, Cade remained by the woodpile. He didn't listen, didn't need to. He understood conversations like this. They didn't belong to him. Bramble lay just inside the doorway, watching both of them. At one point, Owen stepped closer, hesitating, then reached out as if to touch his mother's shoulder. Bramble rose instantly, not aggressive, not threatening, but firm. He stepped between them, looked up at Owen, held his gaze, and didn't move. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't fear. It was judgment. As if the dog who had seen the storm, the cold, the waiting, was asking one simple question. Where were you when she needed you most? Owen's hand froze mid-air, then slowly lowered. I understand, he whispered. Eleanor's eyes softened slightly. Not fully, but enough. Hours passed. They spoke. Not everything, not all at once, but enough. Owen told her about the job, the long days, the isolation, the assumption that life at home would continue, without him needing to be part of it. I thought providing was enough, he admitted. Eleanor nodded. So did your father. That landed differently. But he always came back, she added quietly. Owen looked down. I want to fix this, he said, not loudly, not desperately, but steadily. I don't want you to come back for appearances. I want you to come back because it's right, because I can be better. Eleanor studied him again, longer this time. And if I don't? She asked. Owen's breath caught. Then I'll come here, he said. I'll earn it, however long it takes. That was new, not demand, not expectation. Choice. Outside, the sky dimmed. Evening settled. Cade returned inside briefly, picked up his pack, set it near the door. Eleanor noticed. You're leaving, she said. Cade nodded once. Roads are clear. No explanation, no farewell speech, just movement. Owen looked at him. Really looked this time. You saved her, he said. Cade shrugged slightly. She stayed alive. That was all, but Owen understood. That kind of answer didn't come from pride. It came from responsibility. Eleanor stood slowly, walked toward Cade. Her steps were steady now, not strong, but certain. I want to give you something, she said. Cade frowned slightly. I didn't. It's not a payment, she interrupted. It's a decision. She placed the metal box on the table, the one from beneath the floor. The cabin, she said. The land, the papers. Cade didn't move. I have a son, she continued, glancing briefly at Owen. And maybe he will learn. Maybe he will earn his way back into my life. Owen didn't look away. But you, she said, turning back to Cade, you didn't know me. You didn't know me anything, and you still stayed. A pause. You kept what others were ready to throw away. The words hung in the room, heavy, simple, true. I trust you with it. Cade looked at the box, then at her. I don't stay, he said quietly. Eleanor smiled, not sadly, not hopefully. Not yet, she replied. That, he didn't argue. Bramble stood, moved slowly toward Cade, then sat beside him. Not by Eleanor, not this time. That night, the cabin was quiet. Owen slept in the chair, Eleanor in her room. Cade remained awake, sitting near the door, as he had before. But something had changed. When the night deepened, Bramble didn't follow Eleanor. He didn't return to the warmth of her room. Instead, he walked across the floor, stopped at Cade's door, and lay down, facing outward, guarding, not the past, but the man who had chosen not to walk away. The morning Eleanor left was quiet, not heavy, not tragic, just certain. Snow no longer fell the way it had when everything began. Now it lingered in patches, thinning across the ground as if winter itself had grown tired of holding on. The sky stretched wide above the trees, pale blue, clean, like a breath taken after a long silence. Owen Vale stood beside the truck, hands in his pockets. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't avoiding. He was waiting. Eleanor stepped out of the cabin slowly. She wore the same coat, but it fit her differently now, not as something to endure the cold, but something she chose to carry. Her posture had changed, still fragile, but no longer uncertain. Cade Mercer stood near the porch, not close, not distant, just present. No one spoke at first, because this moment didn't belong to words. Eleanor looked around the cabin, the walls, the trees, the space that had nearly been her last. Then she looked at Cade. I'm going with him, she said. Cade nodded. He had known, not because she told him, because she had decided. That's where you should be, he replied. Eleanor smiled faintly. Maybe, she said. Then, after a pause, "Or maybe this is just another place I'll pass through." Cade didn't answer, because some truths didn't need agreement. Owen opened the truck door, waited. Eleanor walked toward it, step by step. Bramble followed. At the edge of the clearing, she stopped, turned, for a moment. She hesitated. Then she knelt slowly beside the dog. Her hands moved through his fur, the familiar rhythm of years and memory. "You don't have to come," she whispered. Bramble looked at her, not confused, not torn, just aware. He leaned forward slightly, pressed his head against her hand, then stepped back and turned, walking toward Cade. Eleanor exhaled softly. There was no hurt in it, no rejection, only understanding. "Of course," she said, "because some bonds don't follow the path you expect." She stood again, walked to the truck. Owen didn't speak, didn't question. He simply opened the door, helped her in, then looked once more toward Cade. "I'll come back," he said. Not a promise, not yet, a direction. Cade gave a slight nod. The truck started, rolled slowly down the narrow path, disappeared into the trees. The sound faded, and then there was only the cabin again. Cade stood still for a long time, not because he didn't know what to do, but because he did. Bramble sat beside him, not leaning, not seeking, just there, as if to say, "Now it begins." Time moved differently after that, not slower, not faster, truer. Cade stayed, not because he had nowhere else to go. He had learned long ago that there was always somewhere else. He stayed because, for the first time in a long time, nothing was pushing him away. The cabin changed, not all at once, not dramatically, but piece by piece. The roof was repaired first, each plank set with care, each nail placed with intention, then the windows, cleared, reinforced, the wiring fixed, the cut line replaced, the light restored. And outside, a small garden began to take shape. At first it was just soil turned over, then rows, then structure. Cade worked with the same discipline he had once used in war. But this was different. There was no enemy, no mission, just building. And Bramble, always nearby. The dog moved through the space like he had always belonged to it. He watched the road, tracked the wind, listened to things Cade didn't always hear. Sometimes he would stop mid-step, lift his head, and stare into the trees, not tense, not afraid, as if remembering something or waiting for something. People began to come, not many at first. A man with a broken-down truck, a woman who had taken a wrong turn in a storm, an old couple who needed warmth for one night. Cade didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. He fixed what could be fixed, offered what could be offered, fire, water, a place to sit. Nothing more, nothing less. And something strange happened. People stayed longer than they meant to, not because they had to, because they felt allowed to rest, allowed to exist without explanation. The cabin became something else, not a shelter, not exactly. A pause, a place where the world stopped asking why, and simply accepted that you were here. Weeks passed, then months. The snow melted, the ground softened. Spring didn't arrive loudly. It crept in, quiet, persistent. One afternoon, a familiar truck returned. Cade didn't react immediately. He stood by the woodpile, waited. Eleanor stepped out. She looked stronger, not younger, not lighter, stronger. Her hair, still silver, was tied loosely at the back. Her hands still bore the marks of time, but her eyes, clearer. She smiled when she saw the cabin. Then she saw Bramble. The dog ran, not fast, not frantic, but certain. He reached her, stopped, then leaned into her legs. She laughed softly, a sound that hadn't existed in the first days. "I knew you would stay," she said. Bramble didn't respond, not in ways people understand. He stayed with her for a moment, then turned, walked back, and stood beside Cade, as if completing something. Eleanor watched that moment carefully. Not the reunion, the return. The way the dog, who had once clung to her for warmth, now chose a different place to stand. Not instead of her, but beyond her. And in that quiet shift, she understood something she hadn't before. Some connections are not meant to be kept. They are meant to be passed forward. They sat on the porch together, Cade on one side, Eleanor on the other. Between them, Bramble. The sun dipped slowly behind the trees. Light stretched long across the clearing. No one spoke much. There was no need. The world moved around them, birds returning, wind softening, life continuing. Eleanor rested her hands in her lap, looked out at the land. "You've done something good here," she said. Cade shook his head slightly. "I just didn't close the door." Eleanor smiled. "Sometimes that's all it takes." Silence again, but this time it wasn't filled with uncertainty. It was filled with knowing. Later that evening, Cade stepped away to split wood. The same rhythm, the same motion. Eleanor watched from the porch. Bramble lay between sun and shadow, and in that quiet space, everything that had been broken felt held, not fixed, not erased, but held, as if the world, for once, had decided not to let go. This story reminds us that not every home is built by blood, and not every family is the one we are born into. Sometimes the people who should have protected us fail us. Sometimes life drives us out into the cold in ways we never expected. But even then, God can still make a road where there seems to be none. He can send help in the middle of a storm. He can use a wounded heart, an old cabin, and even the faithful instincts of a dog to guide broken people toward mercy, truth, and a second chance. The lesson is simple but powerful. Never ignore someone who is hurting. Never assume a small act of kindness means nothing, and never believe that being cast aside means your life has lost its value. In everyday life, we pass people carrying silent pain all the time. A kind word, a phone call, a meal, a stop on the side of the road, a decision to truly see someone. These things may look small to the world, but in God's hands, they can become miracles. Maybe that is how many miracles happen. Not always with thunder from heaven, but through ordinary people who choose compassion when it would be easier to walk away. That is what Cade did. That is what Eleanor received. And that is what Bramble, in his loyal and God-given instinct, helped reveal. Sometimes love finds us again when we think life has already closed the door. So if this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who may need hope today. Leave a comment and tell us where you are watching from or what part of this story stayed with you the most. And if you believe stories like this still matter, please subscribe to the channel and stay with us for more. May God bless every person watching this. May He protect your home, heal the places in your heart that no one else can see, and send the right people into your life when you need them most.